All right, we're back from the holidays on a Wednesday night. Welcome back, Pastor
You
Joe.
have holidays?
Welcome back with a new arm, or new shoulder anyway.
And a new Bible, and somebody else got a new Bible.
Yeah, we both got NASBs over the Christmas.
Woo!
So, happy Merry
New
Christmas.
American Standards.
Merry Christmas to us. Yeah, that's right. All right.
Yeah, I used to use one back in Bible college, and I haven't
Yeah.
got another one.
Yeah.
That's good.
So, yeah, we've left off in 2 Samuel chapter 19. And we're going to pick up in verse 23 because it kind of ends a section there where it says, "And the king said to Shimei, 'You shall not die,' and the king gave him his oath." We're going to kind of leave that section behind. It kind of ends of a section where Shimei was yelling at him when he was leaving, you know, cursing him. And then he's asking for forgiveness on the way back. However, he's going to leave it to his son to take care of Shimei in the next book, actually. So, but here we're kind of leaving that behind. David is coming back to Jerusalem and things to settle some things out, and so he meets Mephibosheth next.
So very interesting to me that Benjamin, which at the very end of the book of Judges was like, you know, the cause of this horrific civil war,
right.
And then Saul comes from Benjamin. Now these Benjaminites are going to keep coming up in the face of David.
Yeah.
And it's just like you can't quite trust them.
Right.
You got people like Shimei who just seem to be waiting for something to go wrong.
Yeah, right.
You know, so they can take advantage.
Yeah.
And I kind of see that as we go through this, and I think David's got this sense too, that there's, you know, of course, coming through all this rebellion and everything, there's kind of this dark undercurrent.
Yeah, right. And it's interesting to me that Saul, from the New Testament, Paul, is from that tribe, and I think the Lord is showing us a lot of grace, by choosing him as really the apostle to the church. So it's very interesting that he chose him. So,
it is.
Yeah. So on to verse 24.
Mephibosheth, son of Saul, the Benjaminite, who had been eating at David's table, right?
Yes.
Where we saw him last.
Yeah, Jonathan's son.
Jonathan's son.
Yep.
Okay. Came down to meet the king. He had neither taken care of his feet nor trimmed his beard nor washed his clothes from the day the king departed until the day he came back safely. Yeah. So when he came to Jerusalem to meet the king said to him, "Why did you not go with me?" Mephibosheth, like, "Where were you?" Yeah. He answered, "My lord, O king, my servant deceived me. For your servant said to him, I will saddle a donkey for myself, that I may ride on it and go with the king, for your servant is lame." Now this was his name? Ziba was his servant. Yeah. And if you remember, he came down to meet David with a bunch of supplies and food and things on the back of a camel, and said Mephibosheth was hoping that, you know, the kingdom was going to fall and all this stuff.
So let's kind of clarify this. Remember, Jonathan dies. This is Mephibosheth. He was running. His nurse dropped him. He got lame. All right. But this is a son of Jonathan who David made a covenant with. Now, so the servant, Ziba, and all his servants, and it was quite a few servants, a lot of land to be had. And so David told Ziba, you know, take care of your master, take care of his land. By the way, Mephibosheth's going to be eating at my table forever from now on. So that was the idea that David put in place. That's what Ziba was supposed to be doing. So we remember back in chapter 16 that Ziba came with all these goods and lied to David and said Mephibosheth betrayed you and isn't supporting you anymore. So Ziba is the liar, and Mephibosheth is correct here. And one more thing here, in verse 24, he hasn't taken care of his feet, he hasn't cut his beard. Looks like he's in mourning here, and that's kind of what it looks like to me. Or at least praying and fasting kind of thing, maybe. But anyway, he's mourning. I think David being gone. He's concerned about his king.
And he's concerned about his reputation as well.
Yeah, right.
He answered, "My lord, O king, my servant deceived me, for your servant said to him, I will saddle a donkey for myself, that I may ride on it and go with the king, for your servant is lame. He has slandered your servant to my lord the king. But my lord the king is like the angel of God, Do therefore what seems good to you. For all my father's house were but men doomed to death before my lord the king. But you set your servant among those who eat at your table. What further right have I then to cry to the king? It's a very interesting reply.
Yeah. I think
Seems
that
to be
he's
sincere.
Yeah, I think he's sincere. I think, well, he's telling the truth. We know that. I think he's sincere. He is submitting himself to the king, and he says to him, do whatever you want. He's not crying for the land or even his life here. So it is very interesting that I think Mephibosheth, through this whole thing, I think he's in the right here. And it's going to be very interesting. We should remind ourselves that David has been in a very confusing time here. He's been confused about some things. He hasn't taken care of the Joab thing, the Amasa thing, some of these other things that have passed us here recently. And David's he's kind of double-minded in some ways, and so he's in a difficult state because of the sin with Bathsheba and the sword that God said has come into the house. And we're going to remember that it's literally come into the house with Mephibosheth, with Amasa and Joab, who are nephews, and there's some other family issues coming up here. But we'll see if the Lord's going to hammer it out here a little bit. So
David seems to be really struggling now. And you had mentioned that it seems like his judgment had kind of left him after the debacle there. And he just seems to be really struggling to know what to do. Yeah. I think he kind of senses rebellion everywhere, you know, and he kind of sees it.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's feeling the effects of it. It's affecting him and everybody that is around him. So all of Israel is divided and messed up. It has been up till now. So everything is a wreck. Yeah.
These next couple of chapters are going to be chaos, and we've talked about that. It's just going to be one thing after another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll see if the Lord's going to straighten it out somehow, or if the king will come around to his senses here. Hopefully he will.
So the king says to Mephibosheth, "Why speak any more of your affairs? I have decided you and Ziba shall divide the land." My notes by MacArthur are pretty much what I had heard back in Bible college, is that David seems to be uncertain here of who's actually telling him the truth, or he's just doesn't have the judgment to really look into the situation. MacArthur says that this was a poor decision. I would kind of agree that this does seem to be like a poor decision to try to divide the land between Mephibosheth and his servant. There's not going to be any goodwill there.
No. Well, again, I think it's a bad decision myself. This is the way I see it. That we were told in the scriptures that Ziba left without him, and then he brought the goods to David. So he is a deceiver. So Mephibosheth's in the right here, and David doesn't take the time to find out justice here. It doesn't say we're going to talk about this later. We'll look into it. Nothing like that. He says, I just don't want to talk about it anymore. There may be this thing too that, like, you know what, Ziba's got a lot of land, and I promised him something, and he's very wealthy, so I don't want him, on the wrong side either. Either way, David, I think, is in the wrong here.
It does seem to be I would agree, it does seem to be a poor decision.
Yeah.
Now Barzillai, the Gileadite, had come down from Roglim.
I think did we miss 30? Did we miss 30?
Maybe. And Mephibosheth said to the king, "Oh, let him take it all, since my lord the king has come safely home."
Yeah. So he hasn't lied since. Mephibosheth has not lied up to now. So right now, I think we have to take him at his word that he's saying, okay, let it go, because he doesn't want problems. Yeah.
So now we have Barzillai.
Well, my mind goes to the New Testament. What does Paul say about judging in the church? He says, why not rather be wronged? We don't take our stuff, if something happens in the church, if we can help it, we don't take it to non-believers. He said, why not rather be wronged than to do that? Let them judge those things inside the church. That's what we have elders for. That's what we have Matthew 18 and Paul's writings and Peter's writings for, so that we can hammer those things out, right? Yeah. So just a kind of a concept here that, it takes strong leaders to say, wait a minute, we've got a little problem here. We should get this hammered out before it festers. Yeah. So,
It is a principle that you bring up in the New Testament for believers to be willing to suffer the loss
yeah,
in order to keep the peace or in order to allow God room to work.
yeah,
And sometimes it's required when you have a dispute with somebody,
Yeah.
whether it's a neighbor or a friend or family member. You know, sometimes to be the peacemaker, you have to be
Yeah.
willing to suffer the loss
yeah.
of things.
But there is a way to make peace through justice too. Like, again, Matthew 18, go to them, then bring it to the church. So it depends on the issue, but the idea, and you said it, making peace, make sure that there's peace in the church.
Yeah, ultimately, you really have to kind of turn it over to God and use the wisdom He's
Yeah.
given. And the church needs to be a place of wisdom in some of these things.
Yeah,
too, so
right.
for that.
Yeah.
Well, all right, so Barzillai, the Gileadite, you waited for this for quite a bit because he's a really old man.
Yeah,
Barzillai the Gileadite had come down from Roglium, and he went on with the king to the Jordan to escort him over the Jordan. So this is kind of a nice show of his loyalty and faithfulness.
yeah,
Barzillai was a very aged man, 80 years old, and he provided the king with food while he stayed at Manaheim, for he was a very wealthy man.
yeah. So back in chapter, I think 17, yes, chapter 17, you'll see that where he was camped at Mahanaim, which means two camps. Remember where the wars usually take place there. And this elderly man came out and helped him and the troops. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So the king said to Barzillai, "Come over with me, and I'll provide for you with me in Jerusalem." Now this may have been kind of an offer from the king to kind of promote Barzillai, if you will, into his inner council, into part of his deal. But Barzillai said to the king, "How many years have I still to live that I should go up with the king to Jerusalem? For I am this day 80 years old. Can I discern what is pleasant and what is not? Can your servant taste what he eats or drinks? Can I still listen to the voice of singing men and singing women? Then why should your servant be added burden to my lord the king?"
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, old age is not for the weak, is it? This poor guy.
we just want to be home, don't we? I think home's a really good place to be.
Yeah.
I think the king here is really interesting. I think David's offer here is the idea that, hey, things are settling down. I'm going to be able to get my table back. I'm going to, things I can offer people a reward for helping me through all this. So he starts to see things settle down, and he's judging these matters. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So Barzillai declines that
Yeah.
promotion.
Yeah.
Your servant will go a little way over the Jordan with the king. Why should the king repay me with such a reward? Now you wonder at this point on Barzillai's time, he's kind of escorting the king.
yeah,
I'm assuming he has with him a number of men. I mean, he's a wealthy deal, so he's kind of got an escort for the king back over the Jordan. There does seem to be a little concern about getting the king back safely to
yeah.
Jerusalem.
It seems like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
The king's out of his territory, so it's like seeing somebody to the door of your house,
Yeah.
which my wife is really good at, and I'm like, you know where the door is. So,
I just have a feeling like he senses, like David does, that there's some real chaos.
yeah,
There's
yeah.
some real chaos in the nation.
I think I set myself up there. So, anyway, please let your servant return that I may die in my own city near the grave of my father and my mother. But here's your servant Shimham. Let him go over with the Lord my king and do for him whatever seems good to you. And the king answered, Shimham shall go over with me, and I will do for him whatever seems good to you, and all that you desire of me I will do. So he's repaying him for his goodness.
He is indeed. Then all the people went over the Jordan, and the king went over, and the king kissed Barzillai and blessed him, and returned to his own home. By the way, kissing was a real sign of respect back then.
Yeah, yeah.
And the New Testament even says, greet one another with the holy kiss.
Yep. We're going to stick with the handshakes, though.
Well, there is some COVID going on.
Yeah, there's that.
There is that.
I'll give my wife a holy kiss when I get home, but that's about it.
Psalm 2 tells the kings to be wise and kiss the son lest he be angry.
Yeah, yeah,
And you perish in the way.
yeah,
So it is a sign more of submission,
yeah.
if you will.
Yeah.
All right, so Barzillai goes back to his own home on the other side of the Jordan.
The king went on to Gilgal, and
No,
Shimham went on with him, all the people of Judah, and also half the people of Israel brought the king on his way. So here we are. Here's where things are starting to come back together here. We've got Judah, all the people of Judah. This is kind of where he started, where he had Judah and then he brought Israel over. Remember, Amasa was a huge part of that. We're going to see his name come up again. And then half the people of Israel brought the king on his way. So you see the progression of this reuniting again of Israel and Judah.
And you also see here that there is still some kind of a division between Judah and the rest of Israel.
Yeah. Which before Rehoboam and Jeroboam, they're divided here.
There's
It's just
some
very
kind of division.
interesting. Yeah.
Then all the men of Israel came to the king and said to the king, "Why have our brothers, the men of Judah, stolen you away and brought the king and his household over the Jordan and all David's men with him? Maybe it's because you tried to kill him."
Well, there's that.
Yeah, there was that.
Yeah. So there's going to be a point. It says it in Isaiah. It says it in the book of Ezekiel a couple times, and some other places that Ephraim and Judah, if you will, Israel and Judah are going to come back together. In one place it says there won't be any jealousy anymore. And we see this jealousy. Remember even Manasseh and that whole thing back in the book of Judges. And some of this stuff just continues to go on, this disunity. Somebody is always mixing it up. And I think, again, this is the ramifications and the remnant of what David did, his sin, and it brought this problem into the house, and into the house of Judah and Israel, and between them two. So the reuniting by Christ is going to be permanent. And we look for that jealousy and that hatred or meanness to be gone,
To be gone.
Habakkuk talked about the violence that was in the nation there.
Yeah. But as you can see now, David's dealing with one issue after another. Mephibosheth. Right. And it seems like a lot of the old men, and we're going to see some more old men, are dying off here, Barzillai.
Yeah.
And some of the old guard have aged out. Even David, of course, has aged a bit in all of this. And now we have this division between Judah and Israel. Yeah. And they are angry about it. Yeah. All the men of Judah answered the men of Israel, "The king is our close relative. Why then are you angry over this matter? Have we eaten at all the king's expense, or has he given us any gift?" And the men of Israel answered the men of Judah, "We have 10 shares in the king. And in David also we have more than you. Why then did you despise us? Were we not the first to speak of bringing back our king?" After you got defeated at the woods there, But the words of the men of Judah were fiercer than the words of the men of Israel.
Because this is junior high in the playground, we're fighting over.
Yeah. So, no, he's my friend.
He's my friend. Yeah, exactly. Interesting. Just very, very interesting.
And this cannot give David a lot of confidence at this point.
No.
He's got to be seeing these divisions everywhere he looks.
Yeah, he's looking for peace, and I think God is too. Remember, he said in the New Testament, he tells us to live at peace as far as it matters to you. As far as you can take it and make peace. And so that's what is happening. They need peace right here. So now there happened to be there a worthless man. Where have we seen this word before? Yeah. We've seen it before in 1 Samuel. And we saw it in the book of Judges. So there's another worthless man. Now there happened to be there a worthless man whose name was Sheba, the son of Bichri, a Benjamite. Another Benjamite. And he blew the trumpet and said, "We have no portion in David, and we have no inheritance of the son of Jesse, every man to his tents, O Israel." So this looks like to me, remember, there's no chapter divisions in the original. It goes right into this. The next couple lines, a verse as we put it, goes right into this. It looks like Sheba took advantage of the disruption and stepped in and said, "Hey, let's mix it up."
Yeah. So all the men of Israel withdrew from David and followed Sheba. All the men of Israel.
Yeah, right.
Followed Sheba.
He had half.
Yeah.
Now he doesn't have any.
A victory, but the men of Judah followed their king steadfastly.
Yeah.
From the Jordan to Jerusalem. maybe they were right not to trust these guys.
Yeah, yeah. Well, division after division, just things are starting to settle down, and then another person comes up. Again, it just reminds us of unity that we need to have in the church. I think especially as we're going into darker times. You know, Paul talks about, here's a concept, a very interesting concept. Paul says, do not argue over disputable matters. But then Jesus says, all of these words speak of me. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word. So it depends on how much do you love the word, and how much do we want to believe the word and trust the word, all of the word. Then as you do and you go along and meet people, you're going to get into discussions, nice word, into arguments, hopefully not. These things are going to come up, and we need to be very careful going into these dark times. As I've been saying to the church on Sunday night for the past maybe 5 years now, that the church is being stirred up politically, has been being stirred up politically, and now it's coming down to the spiritual, and we need to be very, very careful in taking sides and how we work through these things, because the devil is going to be out to destroy us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, David came to his house in Jerusalem. The king took the 10 concubines who he had left to care for the house and put them in house under guard, provided for them, but he did not go into them. So they were shut up until the day of their death, living as if in widowhood. So there's been nothing really good from Benjamin since Book of Judges, and it is not good to be a concubine in any of these Old Testaments. No. They just seem to be...
Ask Hagar.
Yeah.
Ask the lady in Judges. Ask these people. We're going to talk about slavery, and basically concubines in a way are human property, if not slaves.
They're sure treated that
depending on who owns you, I guess. But yeah, it's not a good place to be as a concubine. So we'll have none of that.
Yeah, yeah. Right. So that's just a bad deal. There are some things in the Old Testament that seem pretty severe, and it makes you kind of wonder how all of these things work together. Yeah. Yeah. Then the king said to Amasa, "Call the men of Judah together to me within 3 days, and be here yourself." So a little background on Amasa.
All right. So now remember Joab. He killed somebody by sleight, and the king was angry at him, so he said to Amasa, back I think in chapter 16, if I'm getting my books right here, but he told Amasa, "You will be my commander instead of Joab," and he promised it to him. And so right here, he's keeping his promise to Amasa, who again is a nephew. No, I'm sorry, Amasa is not a nephew. But, see, wait a minute. I'm getting mixed up a little bit. One of these is, they're cousins. Yeah, Joab and Amasa are cousins. So this is his nephew. So he's telling this nephew, "You're going to be my commander. Go and call Judah within 3 days and be here yourself." So Amasa went to summon Judah, but he delayed. Here's what happened. He delayed beyond the set time that had been appointed, and this is the confusing thing.
That is a bad deal. It sounds like it's kind of disobeying orders.
Yeah.
Call the men of Judah together to me within 3 days. Be here yourself. Now David's led the army. He knows how long it takes to muster the men out and to be there, and he certainly should probably have the lion's share of them in 3 days. Yeah. So what is going on with Amasa that he delays?
There's no answer to this here. We really don't understand this. Up till now, remember, he was working for King Saul. He was the one that was able to bring Israel over, and he's been diligent on the side of David up till now. And so he delays here, and it doesn't make any sense. And I think he's going to make another error, kind of an error here in another couple of verses that doesn't bode well. There's no answer for this. There's the confusion. I think we're supposed to be confused because they're confused. David's confused, Israel's confused, Judah's confused, and I'm confused.
I think David's a bit wary here of Amasa being, Absalom's general. I mean, you're really seeing rebellion at every turn all the way through here. The big battle is done, but there's all this other stuff's going on. And David's very concerned about this. So David says to Abishai, now Sheba, this rebel who's taken Israel to him, Sheba, the son of Bichri, will do us more harm than Absalom because of this delay, because they weren't able to jump on it right away.
Yeah.
Take your Lord's servants, pursue him, lest he get himself to fortified cities and escape from us. So he's given the command over to Abishai.
Yeah.
So David seems to be having some issues with Joab because he's trying to replace him.
Yeah.
And now he seems to have a real sense that Amasa has failed him.
Yeah, right. And by the way, David here does not call Joab. Okay, and that's crucial to understand here, because Joab's going to jump into the mix here, right here. Verse 7, there went out after him Joab's men, and the Kerethites and the Pelethites. Remember that those are the mighty men, those are the Gentile mighty men. They went out from Jerusalem to pursue Sheba, the son of Bichri. When they were at the great stone that is in Gibeon, Amasa came to them. Okay, now get this picture. Got your cameras rolling? David says to Amasa, go out. Amasa delays. Then he says to this other guy, okay, you go out. But Joab goes out. But then Amasa shows up. So you've really got three commanders. And this is confusing. I think we had three popes once, didn't we?
We did.
We had three popes once.
Yeah,
it's very
Great
confusing
Schism.
if you go back into the history, the Great Schism. Mm-hmm. Yeah, go back into the history, look up the Great Schism.
There's two great schisms. You got to find the right one.
Yeah.
The one of three popes, not the division of the East and West Church over East.
Yeah, okay. You're a historian, and yeah, so thanks for that. But anyway, so you've got David sent out a commander, but then Joab takes the guys. Now Amasa shows up. Who's in charge? Who's on first? What's on second? Somebody hit that same point. Anyway, verse 8, when they were at the great, okay, Joab was wearing a soldier's garment, and over it was a belt with a sword and its sheath fastened on his thigh. And as he went forward, it fell out. So was this purposeful? Because watch what he does. And Joab said to Amasa, is it well with you, my brother? And Joab, remember, they're cousins. And Joab took Amasa by the beard with his right hand to kiss him. But Amasa did not observe the sword that was in Joab's hand. He must have reached down and grabbed it. So Joab struck him with it in the stomach and spilled his entrails to the ground without striking a second blow, and he died. Then Joab and Abishai, his brother, pursued Sheba, the son of Bichri. So,
well, that's not a nice thing to do to your cousin.
This is just a mess. This is how Joab is, and this is why he wanted to get rid of him. It didn't work. It's just again, I think these are ramifications of David's sin, and he's not dealing with things properly, and God is allowing it up to a point. So
it won't be until David's deathbed when he gives Solomon kind of a hit list of people, and Joab will be on it. Do not let his white hair go down to the grave.
Yeah, one or two others too. So
there was a list.
Yeah.
So one of Joab's young men took his stand by Amasa and said, whoever favors Joab and whoever is for David, let him follow Joab. So the army is kind of promoting Joab almost over David's head. Yeah. David can't like that.
Now, it's not a good thing. When things settle down here, it does bring order, because we've said in the past even that Joab is a pretty good commander when he's fighting for Israel. He knows his tactics, he knows war, but he's cunning. He's double-minded, and he takes things in his own hands, literally. So that's the problem with him. Yeah, he should have been fired a long time ago.
So a little kind of gore here. Amasa lay wallowing in his blood in the highway, and to anyone who came by, seeing him, stopped. And when the man saw that all the people stopped, he carried Amasa out of the highway and into the field and threw a garment over him. Yeah. And when he was taken out of the highway, all the people went on after Joab to pursue Sheba, the son of Bichri. In other words, this Amasa was causing some real consternation among the troops, because they knew that David had appointed him,
right,
to muster the men and to lead it. And there this guy is Yeah, wallowing in his blood on the highway. So they take him off the road so people aren't going to stop and look and see what's going on.
Yeah. So one commander's out of the way, and as evil and as bad as that was, it is going to bring some solidarity to some extent behind Joab, and David's task is to, take out his enemy here.
So Sheba's trying to get a following, and Sheba passed through all the tribes of Israel to Abel of Beth-maachah, and the Bichrites assembled and followed him in. The Bichrites.
That's all the way to Dan, by the way. It's all the way
All the
up.
way
I mean, they
north.
couldn't go any further. It's up north. Yeah. And all the men who were with Joab came and besieged him, and Abel of Beth-maachah. They cast up a mound against the city, and it stood against the rampart, and they were battering the wall to throw it down. Then a wise woman called from the city, "Listen, listen, tell Joab, come here, that I may speak to you." And he came near her, and the woman said, "Are you Joab?" He answered, "I am." Then she said to him, "Listen to the words of your servant." And he answered, "I am listening." Now this again takes us back to the book of Judges, where there's a woman there who's kind of taken the lead. And sometimes a woman has to step in. We need some wisdom to get things done. So that's what's
So
happening
you're
here.
certainly
Yeah.
a picture of wisdom here,
Yeah.
although
It's brutal.
it is brutal.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
that's a good
Yeah.
word.
Yeah.
She said, "They used to say in former times, 'Let them but ask counsel at Abel,' so they settled the matter. I am one of those who are peaceable and faithful in Israel. You seek to destroy a city that is a mother in Israel. Why will you swallow up the heritage of the Lord?" Joab answered, "Far be it from me, far be it that I should swallow up or destroy." So she's being why?
Yeah.
She's saying, look, this is a town in Israel. Why are you going to destroy your own?
That's some good wisdom.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
That is not true, but a man of the hill country of Ephraim called Sheba, the son of Bichri, has lifted up his hand against King David. Give up him alone, and I will withdraw from the city. The woman said to Joab, "Behold, his head shall be thrown to you over the wall."
Yeah.
Oh my.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, that's it's brutal, but it's making peace in her city. So that's what she decided to do. And it gives you kind of an idea of the power that she had, and maybe the wisdom that she had. There's going to be prophetesses in the Old Testament
There will be.
that they went to. I want to say her starts with an H. Somebody.
Okay.
Hilda the prophetess. Thank you. Yeah, they went to her for some wisdom. So yeah.
Yeah. So the women went to all the people in her wisdom. They cut off the head of Sheba, the son of Bichri, threw it out to Joab. So he blew the trumpet, and they dispersed from the city, every man to his home, and Joab returned to Jerusalem to the king.
Yeah. So one problem down. Another problem down, I should say. Now Joab was in command. Okay, so I think this is kind of important here. These next verses. Now Joab was in command of all the army of Israel. 1. And Benaiah the son of Jehoiada was in command of the Kerethites and the Pelethites, the Gentiles. 2. Adoram was in charge of the forced labor, slavery. And Jehoshaphat the son of Ahilud was the recorder. Now that is, when you start getting to recorder, Sheba was the secretary, Zadok and Abiathar were the priest, and Ira the Jerite was also David's priest. When you start getting down into those ideas, you start saying, okay, now that's government. That is, David has an order of government. And that is to tell us that things are fairly unified here. They're not perfect, things are not great, but there's some unity here. And then, if you're reading First Chronicles and First Kings and other places, but especially First Chronicles at the end of David's life there, you'll see the order that David has there. And that's kind of what this is alluding to, that David is going to set some order here. God, I think, is giving him some blessing here. So,
But there does seem to be a bit of an issue where David does not have as
Yeah.
perfect control as he used to have.
yeah, right.
Because Joab just marches back in with the army of Israel,
Yeah,
and he has killed David's appointed,
yeah.
And so, just like in a lot of governments, sometimes the bureaucracy begins to carry leader,
Yeah.
instead of the leader
That's right.
commanding the bureaucracy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
So,
yeah. Yep. Next chapter. Go ahead.
oh, we gotta just go from grizzly to grizzly to grizzly. My goodness, the Gibeonites. So the Gibeonites were the descendants of the Canaanite tribe that deceived Joshua, saying, we've come from a long way away, and they had
Right.
worn out sandals and moldy bread, and they made a peace treaty with him
Yeah.
so that they would not get conquered. They lied, saying they're from a long way away, when actually they were one of the Canaanite tribes that was supposed to be conquered by Joshua. So by their cunning, they tricked him
Right.
into making a peace treaty with them. And the Bible says Joshua brought them in and made them slaves, forced labor. They
Forced
were
labor, right.
the hewers of wood and the carriers of water for the tabernacle.
Right.
So when we talk about forced labor in the Bible, that is generally non-Israelite people who have either been captured or assimilated into
Yeah.
Israel.
Yeah.
And they will be a big deal, both in David's reign and even more so in Solomon's, and will become an issue even with Rehoboam and
Yeah.
the division.
The book of Leviticus and Deuteronomy and some other places, but it sets out the idea of slavery, of even concubines in marriage, and the idea of forced labor too. Those who are conquered could be forced into labor, and that's what the Gibeonites were. And there was Solomon even is going to have some forced labor. He has a lot of forced labor, by the way. He gets a lot done with forced labor. Slaves is a little bit different in that you have, if they're Israelite slaves, they could be released after 7 years, and in fact, they must be released. They can sell themselves over for life, but they usually do it for monetary reasons or that they have really become a part of the family, and that's a positive thing. It's generally a positive thing to sell yourself into slavery because it's economically feasible and all that kind of stuff. But you can be a forced slave as well, and then you got the concubine issue that we talked about, where somebody gives you a woman as a gift or as a slave, or many of them are forced as well. And then of course you've just got this idea where, again, that's where we're at, that the Gibeonites in chapter 9, I think, of Joshua, that they lied and so they were forced into slavery.
But as you pointed out, they're under laws. I mean, the
Yeah,
laws,
right.
there are laws that protect them. You can't just go out and slaughter your slaves.
Yeah.
There were laws they had to obey.
Yeah.
The laws of Israel,
Yeah.
and there were, so they were under the law, and they were not allowed to just be slaughtered.
Yeah, in fact, Joshua made a covenant with them, yes, that they wouldn't be, and the Lord held them to that, and that's where we're at with that.
There is blood guilt here.
Yeah, right.
There was famine in the days of David for 3 years, year after year, and David sought the face of the Lord. And the Lord said, there is blood guilt on Saul and on his house, because he put the Gibeonites to death. The blood guilt was on Saul and his house. The famine, though, was on David and the Israelites.
Yeah, yeah. And so you've got injustice in Israel. He's telling David through the famine, fix this. This is, you're coming to me for prayer. Go fix this. Even this is what Jesus said, that if you go to prayer and you know that somebody has ought against you or vice versa, you get up and go make it right, and then go back to prayer. And that's what the thing here is.
So the king called the Gibeonites, spoke to them. Now the Gibeonites were not of the people of Israel, but of the remnant of the Amorites. Although the people of Israel had sworn to spare them, Saul had sought to strike them down in his zeal for the people of Israel and Judah. So Saul was trying to wipe them out.
Remember that it was God who told Moses, wipe out the Amorites.
Yeah.
And so they were supposed to be gone, but the Gibeonites, who are offshoot of the Amorites, again, they made a ploy and got out of it. So anyway.
I think they're a picture of salvation in the Old Testament, because they were brought into the nation right next to the tabernacle. God has the ability to rescue and save even out of the most darkest corners.
Yeah.
And ultimately that was the purpose. It is interesting that in spite of that, they are almost destroyed by Saul.
Yeah, and some of the practices are going to be kind of pretty pagan here, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so David said to the Gibeonites, "What shall I do for you, and how shall I make atonement that you may bless the heritage of the Lord?"
Now, this is interesting because God, we have to remember this, God is saying there is an injustice, go fix it. David is going to them and saying, what do you want? And so you have to make it right with these people because they sense that, things are not right. So we would say, well, okay, somebody asked for something, you say, well, I can't do that because that's against God's law. And to some extent, that's where we have to be, but it's interesting, the syncretism that kind of takes place here in some ways, and some things that happen here, we go, this is just not right, and yet there's an injustice before God that has to be right, made right. So it's very interesting how this plays out.
So the Gibeonites said to him, "It is not a matter of silver or gold between us and Saul or his house. Neither is it for us to put any man to death in Israel." He said, "What do you say I shall do for you?" They said to the king, "The man who consumed us and planned to destroy us so that we would have no place in all the territory of Israel, let 7 of his sons be given to us so that we may hang them before the Lord at Gibeah of Saul, the chosen of the Lord." The king said, "I will give them." So it's interesting here that they're concerned about their place in Israel, and they are going to do this before the Lord.
Yep.
L-O capital O-R-D. That's
It's
Jehovah.
Yahweh. It's Yahweh. Yeah,
It is
exactly.
Yahweh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
And David said, I will give them,
I will give
because the Lord told him to go make it right.
Yeah. But the king spared Mephibosheth, the son of Saul's son Jonathan, because of the oath of the Lord that was between them, between David and Jonathan, the son of Saul. Very important in the Bible that we keep our word.
Yeah.
Jesus talked about this, about being very careful about making oaths and making promises.
Yeah.
Don't do that, because you don't know what the future is going to bring.
Yeah. But
So-
if you do make one, you better keep it.
You better keep it, that's right.
Right.
Which is why it's not good to make them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The king took 2 sons of Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah, whom she bore to Saul. So she's a concubine. Armani and Mephibosheth, that's not the Mephibosheth of Jonathan, that's not Jonathan's son. And the 5 sons of Merab, the daughter of Saul, whom she bore to Adriel, the son of Barzillai, that's not the Barzillai that we talked about earlier. So there's a couple names here being thrown in, but you just got to be careful to divide them. The Melahalathite, and I know I got that wrong, I butchered that. And he gave them into the hands of the Gibeonites, and they hanged them on the mountain before the Lord, and the 7 of them perished together. They were put to death in the first days of harvest, at the beginning of the barley harvest. Now, when is that? It's near Passover. If it's not at Passover, it's near Passover, probably in April. And so it's very interesting what is happening here, that the Gibeonites are asking for blood, 7, which is Yahweh's favorite number, or one of them.
Number of completion.
Yep. It's happening during the barley harvest, or near Passover. Your mind should go to Ruth here a little bit. And they hanged them. So it's just really very interesting that the Lord says, don't call for vengeance, vengeance is mine, and yet there's an injustice, so go do what they want, and God and David does. So it's just very interesting what is happening here.
So one of the sisters, apparently, of the man,
Yeah.
Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah, took sackcloth, spread it for herself on the rock. From the beginning of harvest until rain fell upon them from the heavens, she did not allow the birds of the air to come upon them by day, or the beasts of the field by night. So she's protecting the bodies of her family.
Okay, a couple things here. Your mind should go back if you know your Old Testament. Number 1, it was famine before, right?
Now there's rain.
Now there's rain. So God is blessing them right after this event. And the Lord stirred him up. When David went to pray, the Lord said, I want to send you rain. Go take care of this injustice. And we should take a note of that. And then number two, the idea that she didn't allow the birds to come, that your mind should go back to Abraham, to that sacrifice when he was shooing away the birds until God put him to sleep. So we keep that sacrifice. It's the idea of guarding the sacrifice. This is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to take care of. This is what the Lord is asking of me, and I'm going to take care of it and fight to take care of it. So yeah.
So David was told that Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah, the concubine of Saul, had done. David went and took the bones of Saul and the bones of his son Jonathan from the men of Jabesh Gilead, who had stolen them from the public square of Bethshan, where the Philistines had hanged them, on the day the Philistines killed Saul at Gilboa. And he brought up from there the bones of Saul and the bones of his son Jonathan. They gathered the bones of those who were hanged, and they buried the bones of Saul and his son Jonathan in the land of Benjamin, in Zelah, in the tomb of Kish's father. And they did all that the king commanded. After that, God responded to the plea for the land.
Yeah.
So some takeaways from this. All right, so we have chaos, all this rebellion from Benjamin.
Yeah.
And then we have this kind of finale of an injustice that has to be solved.
Yeah.
It just seems like God is putting a lid on all these rebellious Benjaminites connected to Saul.
Yeah.
And not only exposing the wickedness of Saul's insanity, but at the same time bringing maybe an end to some of the spirit of rebellion that we have seen in Shimei and some of the others who are trying to raise up enemies against David.
Yeah. It's interesting in 1 Chronicles that the line of Saul doesn't get wiped out, but it is a remnant left there. And then finally, I'll end with this. When does David do this? When David was told that Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah, the concubine of Saul, had done, he went and took care of the bones of Saul. And so this was an inspiration on his part, on her part to him, I believe maybe by God, and he went and took care of this. And so David is starting to think a little clearer here, I think, settle some things, and then God, of course, verse 14, he responds and blesses the land. So we can take notes from those, I hope. Yeah. Lord, thank you for your word and love. We're very grateful that you have not left us alone as orphans, that you have given us the Holy Spirit, Lord God, to draw us to you, to help us understand your word, to convict us of sin, and to make us right, Lord, here. And then to understand your word and to walk righteous before you, Lord God. We're very grateful for these dark times, Lord God, that you are calling us to walk rightly no matter how bad it gets, no matter how dark it gets, that we must walk rightly here no matter the persecution that may come. We love you for the opportunity. We love you for this church and this body and all the bodies represented here. We pray in Jesus' precious name. Amen.